So to kick us off, talk about the crime that brought you here today and kind of what was going on in your life at the time.
So my ex-wife was coaching a girls 15 and under volleyball team. And I was assisting just to help out. I wasn't designated a coach or anything, but I would help just with everything. And that is how I met my victim. Do you want me to use her name specifically, or?
You don't have to.
Okay. That's how I met her. We had started talking over Snapchat, developed what I had referred to as a relationship. After that, I was having some marital issues with my ex-wife that I would discuss with my victim. I had convinced her to meet up with me in a park, where then I had coerced her into performing oral sex on me.
Okay. And so what else? What else?
Yeah. After that, while that was going on, I was also digitally penetrating her. After that, we had met up again a separate time at my house, where I had once again coerced her into the same thing with the oral sex, and then I had started to perform it on her as well. I had noticed her kind of differently at that point, where she was shutting down. She got real quiet. So I had stopped. I noticed her crying, and then she had left. And then shortly after, I believe the next day, was when my ex-wife had found some messages between my victim and I, and that's how everything kind of ended, and then ended up where I'm at today.
Okay. Sit back and you're going to listen to the victim statements. Heather's going to bring them on. All right. And they're going to address us and not the member.
Robert, I'm going to promote you to panelists, if you could accept that. Thank you. Robert, you can leave your camera off or turn it on when you share your statement. And then I know Valerie is sharing as well. So whichever of you would like to go first, go ahead and begin sharing your statements.
It's actually my wife, Natalia. I don't know where the name Valerie came up.
About that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share your statements when you're ready.
Okay, Natalia's actually going to go first.
I just want to say that from the get-go, I feel that Mr. Brazier's reiteration of the fact is lacking. He engaged in quite a pattern of grooming with our daughter, and he used his marital problems as part of that grooming too, and the grooming included feeding her alcohol underage, encouraging her to keep quiet about it, and using his minor children as a mechanism to get her to go over to his house or to be around him or to Snapchat with him. And the consequences of this have been devastating on her and our family. She never did club volleyball again. She dropped out of volleyball in high school. The rest of high school was very difficult for her. Mr. Brazier's wife, unfortunately, spread a lot of misinformation with the volleyball players and with the public. And Frankie would be sitting in school and receive messages from people saying things like, "We heard you fucked your coach's husband," or things like that. And those would happen into 2 years after this happened. And it would she'd have to leave school, and she's been in counseling the entire time. She basically just wanted to finish high school as soon as possible. She graduated a year early after her junior year, and left the area because this has just been, it was horrible for her. She, changed her patterns of hanging out with friends, where she went around town. And when she is home with us, she's just very close with us, but she has very few friends from high school, and just a horrible memory of high school and her youth. And this is very definitive for her in her life. At the sentencing hearing, Mr. Brazier didn't acknowledge the harm he caused to her or to our family. He focused mostly on the harm he caused to himself and his own family. And we just feel that continues for him to underappreciate the extent to which he manipulated a minor and changed the course of her life for forever. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Robert, did you want to say something as well?
Yes, so, as far as the impact it's had on, it feels like she's always like, just a moment away from breaking down, having an episode, being in tears, being taken right back to that place of manipulation. And it's hard to see as a parent. You want your child to do well in life, and this set her back immensely. She didn't move forward with her education at all last year because she just wanted to get out of the area, so she graduated early. Frankly, she was just kind of on a mission doing online work to be able to not have to go to school her senior year and be around all those people with all those memories. She's going to try to go to college, and we just hope that works and that she can get through it and can deal with the stress on top of everything she's dealing with. She's still seeing a counselor on a regular basis. Those are things we hope she can move past. As far as the defendant is concerned, we have real concerns that he's a high risk of reoffending. Maybe not perhaps the same type of sexual abuse, where he gets in a situation where he can manipulate a child like this again. But there's just a lot of triggers right now that I see for him. He's got an alcohol and drug problem. He admitted that. He has had suicidal ideations, so self-harm was discussed when he was being investigated for this. And he's a perpetrator. He's abused people in the past, and he has a very stressful situation with his family life. It's all of those things together are a recipe for disaster. We think that it's very likely that he'll commit another crime in the future. And so we just want to warn you of that he's got a pattern of manipulation, and he frankly, from our perspective, it's hard to trust anything he says.
Thank you. Was there anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia and Robert. This is Heather, and I'm so sorry I don't know where I got Valerie. My brain just spazzed out. So I am so sorry. Thank you for sharing your statements. We're going to put you back as attendees, and then you can just sit back and listen to the rest of the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Hobbs, it's your turn. What are your response to what you just heard? Oh, sorry, Mr. Brazier. I looked at your counselor's name. Sorry, I'm very confused to do. So Mr. Brazier, would you tell us what your response is, please, to the victim statement that you just heard?
I mean, going through treatment, I realized how much manipulation and grooming that I had done, unknowing at the time of the crime, but now learning about myself and learning the things that I had done and the ways that I used, my kids and my family life to make myself vulnerable to that type of behavior, damaging, and not only to myself but to the victim and to the victim's family, and how she's going to go through life now, not trusting a male figure, or having flashbacks or nightmares or anything like that because of what I did. And I know there's nothing I can do, unfortunately, to take back what I've done, but I am working on making the correct steps to not repeat what I've done by going through treatment and learning, the ways that I had used manipulation and the immediate gratification that I had received, rather than just suppressing that and knowing right from wrong, and not feeding into that just immediate, like, hey, I need to do this. No, I need to slow down, take my time, think about things, and learn from everything that had just happened.
All right, so we've talked about substance use a little bit. Talk to me about your history of substance use and where are you with that today?
So for a very short period, I was using marijuana and edibles. I have not used any while I was on pretrial supervision, and while in prison, I have not been on anything besides my medication. So I feel like I've been, I believe it was 8.5 to 9 months that I was on the pretrial supervision. I didn't drink, I didn't do any drugs. I went to therapy regularly.
Okay, so about your mental health. So we're talking about depression. Anxiety. Is that something that is new since you've been incarcerated that you've learned about, or did you know about that before?
I had known about it before. I didn't really want to kind of believe it, as a male. When I was younger, it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't like mental health wasn't as big as it is now. I was on medication before I became incarcerated for my anxiety, and I'd been seeing a therapist before as well.
So were you on medications when you committed the crimes?
I don't believe so. I think it was after the fact that I got on the medications.
Okay. And so what's different since you started taking the medication?
I've been able to think things through a lot clearer. I'm not as, looking for the right word, not as just going out and doing something, not as like sporadic. It's more controlled. I can calm myself down. I can think things through rather than just going and doing things.
Okay. And my last question before I pass you over to a colleague, what are your plans in the space of substances and mental health? If we were to move you forward today, what are you going to do in those places?
I definitely plan on staying on my medications, getting back to the therapist that I was seeing before I became incarcerated. If not being able to go back to him, then finding someone else to stay on that track, and then just continuing to not drink, not put myself near alcohol or drugs, and just stay away from it completely.
All right. Thank you for answering my question. I'll see if Jesse has a question. Jesse, did you have some?
I do. Hello, I'm Jesse. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
So you took treatment classes. What did you learn about your cognitive distortions? What were some of the ones you had?
Yeah, so a few of my cognitive distortions were impulsivity was one, viewing women as objects, sexual gratification, immediate gratification, and just learning that, I looked out for me. I didn't look out really for anybody else. It was more of what I wanted and not what was better for everybody.
Okay. And also, what did you learn your red flags were in SOTP?
Some of the red flags were alone with minors, alcohol and drugs, and then mixing alcohol, drugs, minors. Sorry, trying to.
Oh, you're okay. You're okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My other question for you is, how many total victims do you have?
So through treatment, I had learned that I had 2 major victims. Obviously, the victim that we're here talking about today, and my ex-wife, because while we would have sexual relations, there were times where drugs and alcohol were used, so we could not consent. And then also there's what I kind of called like indirect victims, which would be like the victim's family, other people that were impacted by what had happened by my actions.
Okay. My last question for you, who's Graceland?
Graceland is my youngest daughter, or my youngest child. She's my only daughter.
Okay. So my question to you is, how would it make you feel if the same charges were upon her that your victim went through?
I can't imagine having to face that as a father. And I had thought about this question because I've been asked it in treatment as well. And it's something that, like, I never saw myself doing, obviously, before, and it happened. I'd be extremely upset. I really don't know how I would truly handle the situation, and hopefully, I don't have to.
Thanks for answering the questions I had. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jesse. Meredith, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So currently, what is your contact with or relationship with your ex-wife as far as, discussing your kids, or, what's your relationship like with her right now?
I don't talk to her a whole lot. A lot of the times her mother has the kids or my mother has the kids. So I kind of talk to my mom or her mom about them. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of contact directly with her.
Okay. And do you have any idea of what your co-parenting situation is going to look like in the future for your kids?
Yeah, we had talked about co-parenting and she was open to trying to figure out what's best for everybody involved. And it was something that we kind of put on hold until I was released, to figure out the best steps moving forward.
Okay. Does she have all of the kids with her? You had mentioned grandparents earlier. So does she have custody of the kids?
Yes.
Okay. Is it just visiting the grandparents frequently?
Her mother does our daycare. She has since we've had this Easton, our second born. So
Okay. And then can you talk to us a little bit about, it looks like your plan is to parole to your grandparents. So can you talk to us about your relationship with your grandparents?
yeah, my grandparents. So I've never had a father in my life. So my grandparents, when we moved back to Dubuque from Michigan when I was extremely young, about 2-3 years old, my grandparents were kind of the first people to help us get back on our feet. I used to go out to Idaho to visit my aunt and uncle every summer with my grandparents. We'd drive out from Dubuque to Idaho and back. So I've spent quite a few summers with them. And we're always over there for holidays, birthdays, anything really that's a family get together is always generally at my grandparents' house. So I've always had a very good relationship with them.
And are they aware of the details of your crime? Have you talked to them about it?
I have.
What about any other support system that you have?
So thankfully I have almost my entire family in Dubuque. My mom, my aunts and uncles, besides the 2 that live in Idaho. So I've got 3 uncles and 2 aunts currently in Dubuque. I have my cousins, which I have 2 male cousins, 2 female cousins that live in Dubuque. My sister currently lives in Florida, but she comes back every once in a while. so she'll be there as well. And then just a few family friends that I've known for 10, 15 years that are regularly either over at my mom's house, my grandparents' house, aunts and uncles, etc., that we're always together.
So I'm looking back at some of your SOTIPS assessments that you've done, your risk assessments, and your first one when you came in pre-treatment was moderate. It was 17 points, and then you're down to 2 after treatment. And reading them, and in the first one, there's a lot of victim blaming, and then post-treatment, there's some more accountability. Where or when do you pinpoint that shift happened for you when you started accepting that responsibility that you were the perpetrator?
So it was obviously after that first kind of interview, but before treatment had started, I really kind of just sat down and looked at myself and told myself the only reason I'm here is because of me. It's not because of what anybody else did. It's my own actions that led me here. And talking with other people and other inmates here kind of helped me like stand back and look at everything as you're the only person that could have put you here. Like it's not anybody else or anybody else's actions. And that's kind of when I realized like, hey, I need to check myself. I'm the reason.
What do you think was the most helpful module or class in SOTP for you?
My personal one would probably be the final disclosure, where we really got everything out there. The initial helped to kind of start everything, but that final part really helped to get everything out and to really hold yourself accountable for all of the actions that you had done.
And then my final question is, what are your plans long term? Do you plan to stay in the Dubuque area?
I do, especially with my kids. I don't want to not be around them, so that's my biggest things.
Okay. And then do you plan to stay with the same employer long term?
I do. I was working with Bauer Built before I had came down, and I really enjoyed working there. So hopefully I can stay there.
All right. Well, thank you. Those are the only questions I think that I have.
Thank you.
Do you have any follow-ups?
I do not, thank you.
All right, so Mr. Brazier, now's the time. Is there anything you'd like us to know? Maybe you've prepared for us before we go into our decision making?
Over these last 2.5 years, I've had a lot of self-reflection, and I understand what I did was extremely wrong, and there's nothing I can do to take it back. But I have put all of my will and my being into becoming a better person and learning from that mistake, and really being able to be someone that can represent themselves into society and help maybe bring attention to what I had done, and so others can be prevented from doing the same thing, and reaching out for help if needed, and any mental health issues that people have going on. I can be someone that they can reach out to, and I can help in the future.
All right, is there anything else? Okay.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit here and listen to me today.
All right, we'll sit back and take a deep breath. Just sit back. We're going to chat a minute, and I'll be right back with you. All right, colleagues.
Oh, let me get back to my notes. I can go first. I'm going to support the recommendation for release. You know, looking at the change in his SOTIP scores from moderate to low with a level 2 is, I guess, particularly compelling here. Also, you know, with the completion of SOTP, keeping him in prison post-treatment is just going to put him at risk of developing a higher risk score. You know, getting him out into the community will get him immediately into aftercare classes, which is important to maintain his low risk status and to, you know, continue to reinforce the lessons from SOTP. And so I'd be looking at that parole. We're not going to need any 10B or anything here since he's going to the grandparents. I'd be looking at the internet restriction, no early discharge, no contact with minors without approval. In the 40A, I'd be SOTP aftercare. I think substance abuse, at least just to get a baseline, because there was alcohol involved, mental health, medication compliance, and then a 50A as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I have some reservations. Even Meredith had said that, there was a lot of victim blaming the SOTIPs. And then when I heard him say in the interview that he was going through marital problems and he was talking to the victim about this, and he made his marital problems basically the victim's problems. That's where I was struggling a little bit. But I do agree with what Meredith said about treatment and aftercare. So I am going to be in support of this DSC recommendation to release the grandparents placed with the same codes that she had mentioned.
Okay. All right, and I too am in agreement. So I just want to make sure that Frankie's parents, Robert and Natalia, know that we heard what you have to say, and this is a very terrible crime. And I know that this is, no matter how much time you would spend in, it's not enough time to fix the damage that has been caused. But I was impressed today. I think Mr. Brazier took responsibility for his actions and has learned quite a lot about himself while being incarcerated. And I see a different person in front of us than I see on paper, for sure, about with mental health help, knowing that that's a key to the direction that he needs to go. So what we're going to do today, Mr. Brazier, is we are going to parole you to your grandparents' house. We do have a lot of coding here. So what it means is you have an internet restriction until you work that out with your parole officer. 20B means you're going to remain on supervision through your discharge date in July of 26. You're not going to get off early. You have no contact with minors unless you go through the approval channels to get notarized letters to do so. And then for treatment, we're going to ask you to do quite a bit. We're going to look at having SOTP aftercare to continue in your treatment, to get a substance use evaluation to see where you stand on that, since that was part of the issue, continuing your mental health journey, and to continue on medication. That does not mean that you can't stop your medication. That means you need to do that with a professional when you make those choices, okay? And then finally, it's going to be a 50A, which is an alcohol prohibition. Don't need to be drinking it and hanging out in places that primarily sells it, like liquor stores and bars. Okay? All right, congratulations. Go out and do well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you for taking the time today.
Thank you. That concludes your interview.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I have to say that we cover these cases, the Iowa cases, specifically to call out what is completely transparent injustices of our system. These cases are frustrating. They are hard to watch. And I was talking about it with Richard on email. I've still never heard his voice. And it's hard to do the Iowa hearings because we pretty much know the result, and they throw mud in the face of the victims. They throw mud in the face of common sense. They throw mud in the face of the judiciary. None of this made any sense. None of it. A judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. That sentencing just took place in 2021. He had a good time date of 7/14/2026. He wasn't locked up until 1/10 of 2022. 2 years and 6 months of the date of this hearing. His wife is a volleyball coach. She is trusted by the parents, by the school. This is for a school. Her cockroach husband finds a way to finagle his way to be an assistant. If you think that's a coincidence, if you think that just happened by chance, I have a bridge to sell you. He then grooms her as the parents speak up and tell the truth of every lie this cockroach left out. He grooms her. He becomes friends with her on TikTok or on Snapchat. He uses his own kids to facilitate the relationship and to hide it. He then uses alcohol in the grooming process. And he slowly does that until he finally gets caught. He doesn't mention the alcohol. He doesn't mention the. He just does it like, well, I went there to teach, and then I had marital problems, and we went to the park, and that happened. And then she came to my house, and that happened. And they reward him for the lies. They reward him. You hear the lives that this destroyed. The lives that this destroyed, and they reward him. But what makes no sense, I mean, none of it makes sense, is that she uses the words, the parole board member, whoa, is that she says, keeping him in treatment in the DOC would risk him getting a higher risk score. Getting him in treatment on the outside would increase the chance of a lower. What are you talking about? Where can you even unpack that? Wait, so being in prison is a higher risk of his risk score going up in treatment? Really? Is that a fact? I mean, is that it? We know that makes no sense. Anyone with who like you don't need to be a rocket scientist to have your PhD. I know we don't have our PhDs. I'm just a Mandoo, but my brain is not that warped where I can't figure out the logic in that. It's like, wait a minute, 1 + 1 is 3. You're right. But even if you wanted to say that we don't understand that 1 + 1 is 3, couldn't you understand that if he has a risk of getting a higher risk score by being in prison, then that he's just a risk? That maybe he should stay in prison? It's like when it's sensory overload when there are so many things wrong with this hearing. I don't even know where to start. Look at this. Look at how he answered this question. He just, that we've had a few in it. They all look the same. Don't tell me he looks like me.
Through treatment, I had learned that I had 2 major victims. Obviously the victim that we're here talking about today, and my ex-wife, because while we would have sexual relations, there were times where drugs and alcohol were used, so we could not consent. And then also,
did you hear that? What? This is when they asked him, who are your victims? I have 2 major victims. Of course, my victim, and then my wife, because when we had sex, drugs and alcohol were used, and that can't be consent. He said that. It's like, what? What are you saying? No, your wife is a victim because her job was to be a volleyball coach for little girls, and you completely wrecked her life. And to her credit, by the way, and thank you, Richard, for pulling these notes, she divorced this roach just 3 months after, which is probably as fast as you can get the process. And I mean, in 3 months, that's pretty fast. And we're so accustomed to seeing them abide by it, and you almost got that impression from him that she was okay with. No, she divorced his ass 3 months after. You wrecked her life because you wrecked her life. Her husband abused her students. Sex, drugs, alcohol, consent. What are you talking about? He's safe to release into society. Not only that, but he was also referring to his victims as women. He said, I need to learn to respect women. These are children. The parole board is disgusting. They're useless. This is why we do this to call. This board needs to be seen for what they are, which is pathetic. Really, they are a danger to society. It's like we can look at these roaches and say how this, but he's not. He's a roach. This is what he is. He's wired. His wiring is broken. And even when he got in prison with the moderate score, and you can tell even now he's clueless. He doesn't get what he is. Listen to the parents, how they spoke. Listen to him victim blaming. Listen to everything that he has said and done. And they parole him. I'm going to read the article. Here, I'll share it with you. This is written in October 26, 2021. He pleads guilty to sexually abusing girl. He pled guilty sexually abusing girl younger than 16. This is just legislation. I mean, we know she was younger than 15 because that was the volleyball team, right? Could have been any age. Could have been 13. Could have been 30-year-old Danielle Brazier entered the plea in Iowa District Court to 2 counts of third-degree sexual abuse. He now faces 10 years in prison. However, his plea document states that he seeks deferred judgment. With a deferred judgment, if probation and payment obligations are successfully completed, the record in this case is expunged. Can you imagine? We have heard about cases like this. Now, thankfully, the judge had a little bit more common sense. A report says that he's a girl younger than 16 twice in the past year, once at the park and once at his residence. Can you still imagine that the DA lets him get away with this pathetic little plea deal? I mean, can you even imagine that? He grooms her. There are so many charges you could have gotten him with. You could have locked him up for years and years and years and years. You have the evidence through the apps. There's alcohol. There's all of the charges you get, but all they did was do that plea deal. And I bet you the victims didn't understand the plea deal. They think, because you read about it and you think, well, it's 10 years. She doesn't need to go to, this is so traumatizing. She's still in the school. Let's just sign it and get it over with. But did they know? Did they have any idea that he could have a good time date 4 years later, or that he could possibly get paroled 2 years later? And again, I can't get over the fact that this idiot insane board said keeping him in prison would run a risk of his risk score getting higher. But here you go. And you probably wouldn't believe it if you didn't see it. And with that, I'll let you go.